Hello everyone. So today we're going to do our very first video for chapter 3. All right, chapter 1 we were talking about how to solve equations, then just now in chapter 2 we were talking about inequalities. Now with chapter 3 we're getting into graphing. All right, so the first couple sections we're kind of easing you into it a little bit, giving you some vocab, reminding you of, how you graph on an x and y plane. All right, and then as we get into it, we'll learn different equations and methods to graph. All right, so this very first section we're calling functions. All right, the first 2 or 3 sections have a little bit to do with what is a function. All right, well, how is that different from just a relation? All right, so if you need at any point, you can always pause the video here. We're on page 61, I think. Yes, we're on page 61 in your student journal. All right, and just make sure you get down these vocab words. All right, so first off, a relation is just a pairing of inputs and outputs. All right, so you'll see in some places you'll have a little thing that says input, and it might say X, and then it'll say output, and it might say Y there too. So a relation could be 1, 2, 3. Let's say this is 4, 5, and 6. So a relation pairs any combination of these inputs and outputs. So let's say 1 and 2 both give me 4, and then 3 could give me 5, or it could give me 6. Okay, when I'm talking about inputs and outputs, I'm plugging in these x values, this 1, 2, and 3, and I'm getting 4 for 1 and 2, and then either 5 or 6 for 3, right? A function is a specific type of relation. Okay, so it says a pairing of inputs and outputs where each input has only one output. Okay, so this right here is not a function. All right, for it to be a function, all right, over here I'm going to make my little inputs. I'm going to say output over here. So let me do 1, 2, and 3 again. All right, so every input can only go to one output on a function. All right, so 1 can go to 4, 2, let's say goes to 5. It's okay if 3 goes to 5. Multiple inputs can have the same output. So 2 and 3 could both equal 5. That's fine. All right. But I can't have 3 possibly equaling 2 different numbers. All right. Then it's not a function. Okay. So every number that I have over here has to go to only one number in the output column. If this is a little confusing, that's okay. We're going to go over a lot of examples with this. Okay. Then domain and range. So a domain are all possible input values in a function. So if I was asking you about the domain for this function right here, I would say, okay, that's all my input values. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Okay, the range are all your possible output values. So that's over here. That's 4 and 5. And I'll show you how to do that in a table with coordinates and in a graph too. I'm not super worried about you guys knowing this independent and dependent variable thing, but just in case you need to know it, your independent variable is your input value and your dependent is your y or your output value. Right? I'm not super worried about this. The things to focus on for today are what is a function and then what's your domain and range. Okay, so let's look at some examples because some of this stuff is really different from what we've been doing. So let's see some concrete examples because I know this is kind of weird to just talk about in theory. Okay, so one concept that we need to know, sometimes it's going to ask us, is this thing a function or not? So sometimes it's going to show us a graph, and we have to figure out, is it a function just from looking at the graph? Okay, so something to remember, because we haven't looked at a lot of graphs yet. Now I'm going to draw a less ugly graph. Okay, so we've got two lines now. This isn't a graph like we would just graph an inequality on. We have both an x and a y. Okay, let's remember that as we go in this direction for x, our numbers are going up. We've got positive numbers. And on this side, we always have negative numbers. Okay, we're going, okay, -1, -2, -3. The spot where they intersect is 0, and we call that the origin. Okay, same thing with y as we move up. Okay, these numbers are rising. And then we've got negative numbers, all right, down here. There's going to be a couple times where you're going to have to look at a graph and tell me some of the points on there. All right, so make sure you feel comfortable with graphing, okay, with the x and y values. All right, so the first thing that we can do if we're being asked, okay, is this graph a function or not? There's something called the vertical line test. All right, and the vertical line test is when we use a vertical line, okay, straight up and down, to figure out, are we crossing more than one point at a time? Okay, so as I'm looking, there's no point on here where I'm touching more than one point with any one vertical line. So this one is a function. Okay, it means I'm not using more than one output per input. If I had a point right here, that would mean I have more than one output for one input, but I don't, so this is a function. I know this one over here is not a function because when I draw this vertical line, I'm touching two different points on this graph. Okay, over here too, I have more than one point, so I know this is not a function. All right, so that's pretty easy to tell when it's just a graph. Okay, and then here we're talking about domain and range. So a lot of times it likes to describe these functions as these little machines, as these input and output machines. Okay, your input are what you're plugging in to whatever function. Okay, so over here we have a function, and the output is what comes out. So if I input, which is my x, if I input -2, okay, so y equals 3x, so 3 times -2, y is going to be equal to -6. My output is -6. That's what I mean by these inputs and outputs. So if you have a machine where you plug in one number, okay, you have an input, you plug in a 1, and then you have two different outputs. Let's say it's 3 and 7. Okay, your machine is broken. It can't be a function. All right, it's fine if you have a machine. It's fine if you have a machine where you could plug in a 1 or a 2 and both of those spit out a 5. Okay, that machine can be a function. All right, it's okay if every single thing that you plug in has the same output, but a function, it's not a function if you plug in one number and you get multiple outputs. Okay, so that visualization helps some people. It's okay if more than one input has the same output, but it's not okay if one input has multiple outputs. All right, so let's look at some examples. If you're still a little confused, don't panic. All right, let's look at some examples here. So first off, in these examples, it wants us to decide, all right, Is this a function? It's a relation because it's a relationship between an input and an output, but is it an actual function? Okay, so I've got this input and output here. Okay, -2 goes to 4. 0 goes to 5. 1 goes to 4. And -2 goes to 5. Okay, that should be an alarm bell. When I have two of the same number in my inputs, that's a warning sign. This is not a function because I can't have -2 sometimes give me 4 and sometimes give me 5, right? No, this one is not a function. Okay, so sometimes it can be a little table like that. All right, sometimes as we scroll down here, I'm trying to think of some examples that are similar to your book. You will see some that are in this format as well. Okay, so if I were trying to decide, is this one an input? Is this one a function? I look at the inputs to the outputs, okay? 1 goes to 8, that's fine. 2 goes to 9. Since 3 goes to 10 and 11, that one would not be a function. Okay, so there's a couple different ways to show the same type of information. Sometimes it's going to give you in just these different ordered pairs. So remember, like we were just talking about on this X and Y plane, okay, these coordinates are talking about a specific place on this plane. Okay, remember that coordinates are always in X and then Y. If you have trouble remembering that, think of it like it's alphabetical order. X comes before Y. Okay, so right here, this 0, 3, we know this is our X and this is our Y. Okay, that would be 0 here on X, and then 1, 2, 3. This would be 0, 3 on the graph. But it's not even asking us to do that. It's asking, is this relation a function? So I'm going to look at all my X values. So right here, 0, 1, 2, and 3 are the X values. Right? 3, 1, 1, and 0 are the Y. So I need to make sure I only have one of each input. Okay, 0, 1, 2, 3. That's all different values for my inputs. Okay, I don't care that I have a 1 here and a 1 here for my outputs. That's still fine. Yes, this one is a function. All right, so that's how you do it when it's just numbers. When you have a graph, okay, like one of these, that's when we use that vertical line test. So you can draw. Sometimes people like to just hold their pencil up and, hold it over their paper and see. Obviously, I can't show you that when I have the video, so I'm going to draw these different little vertical lines. Oh, and it looks like right here, there's two different points on this graph that are crossed by this one vertical line. Okay, so no, that one is not a function. Okay, it has nothing to do with whether it's these dots or whether it's a line. Okay, you can have graphs that are dots and graphs that are lines, and either one of them can be functions or might not be functions. That has nothing to do with it. You cross two different points on this graph with one vertical line. It's not a function. Okay, so let's look at this one. I'm going to draw a bunch of these vertical lines. Only ever crossing one point on my graph at a time. Okay, I don't care if I'm crossing the X and Y axis, that doesn't count. I only care about this line right here, and I'm only crossing one at a time. So yes, this one is a function. Okay? Then the only other thing I'm going to ask you about in this section, in the function assignment, is I might ask you for the domain and range of a certain function. Okay, so remember, domain, there we go. Domain are all your X values, and range are all of your Y. Okay, so remember how to get these different values just from looking at the graph. You've got this point right here. Okay, so don't get confused with what these coordinates are. You've got 0 here as your x value, and then you have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 up on your y-axis. Okay, so if I'm talking about my domain, my first value is a 0. Okay, then over here, that's a 1 on my x-axis. Over here, I've got a 2. Then over here, again, I don't care about my y value with domain. So over here, that's a 3 and 4. And this is a 5. Okay, so if it had just asked me about the domain, I'd be done, but it wants the domain and the range. So domain are all of my x values, and then range are all of my y values. Okay, so up here, 1, 2, 3, 4 is my y value. So 4, then over here, 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't need to write 4 again. Okay, so I can just leave that with this 4 over here, then up 1, 2, 3, another 4. I don't need to write it again. Then over here it changes. It's just 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then another 3, and another 3. All right, and if I wanted to be really exact about it, I wouldn't write it as 4, 3. I would put the numbers in order, right? But that's not too big of a deal. I probably wouldn't count off for that. All right, so my domain is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and my range is just 3 and 4. Okay, and let's see what that looks like over here when I have just a smooth line. I don't have all those independent dots, okay, those disconnected dots that I'm dealing with. Okay, my domain is always just my x values. So over here, let's see, at this point, that's my farthest left point. Okay, I'm going over all the way over here. This is -3 is that x value. Okay, so I say from -3, and then I go all the way over here, all the way on my right, I have +3. Okay, so when I have all these separate dots, I say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all these separate points. Here, I go all the way from -3 to +3. All right. Then in my range, I'm thinking not about where I'm going from left to right like I am here. I'm thinking how far do I go up and down? Okay, so my very highest y value, this point and this point over here, I've got 3. So I'm going to say, well, really, I should have started with my lowest point. Okay, so my lowest point is over here at 0. So I'm going to say from 0 to 3. All right, it wouldn't have been a big deal if I had written from 3 to 0. Again, I'm not going to count off on that, but it's a good habit to go from the smallest number to the largest number. Okay, so when it's a smooth line like that, you're including all the values there in your domain and range. All right, so go ahead. You have an assignment there for 3.1. I know this is a lot of new information. I know we're not used to looking at graphs. All right, so please don't hesitate to ask me any questions. All right, if you're at home today, you can shoot me an email. All right, make sure that we are feeling good about these graphs because I know that is a little bit difficult for some of us. All right, and I will see you guys tomorrow.